Alright, so tonight's lesson is lesson 106, and we are reading and ordering decimals through the 10,000ths. Most of the time we have, normally stopped at the thousandths, but we're going to move on now past the hundredths and the thousandths and get to the 10,000ths. So I have kind of written like a little chart up here that we can always go back to look at. And here's my ones, so I have 6, my decimal point, and then I have my tenths, then I would have my hundredths, my thousandths, and my 10,000ths. You always read the number before the decimal, and then you would say "and" when you get to the decimal point, and then you would read the decimal, and you add the last word for whatever place it's in. So if I had right here, I would say 6 and 23 hundredths, or I would say 6 and 234 thousandths. And then if I had my full number like that, I would say 6 and 2,345 10,000ths. So we're going to do example number 1. We're going to be writing it and using words. Number 1 says use words to name, and I'm not going to say it, 12.625. So go ahead and see if you can use words to write it down to name that decimal. Alright, so you can pause it or you can listen as I do this. So first I need to name the front chunk before the decimal, which obviously we know that number as 12. Alright, 12. Then I see the decimal point and I'm going to write the word "and." And now I need to name my decimal. And I have 625, if I look up here, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So I would write 625 and I name it thousandths. So 12 and 625 thousandths. Alright, the next one, we've been rounding decimals and fractions, and so now we're going to do it, but we just have more places behind our decimal point. So it says round 7 and 345 thousandths to the nearest whole number. So we've been doing this, before, and normally what I would do is I look at my tenths. I always look at my tenths first, and that usually determines if I'm halfway. And when I'm dealing with decimals, 0.5 or 5 tenths is going to be, so this would be 7 and 5 tenths would kind of be my halfway point. And if I look and if I see that my tenths right here is lower than a 5, then I know that I'm going to round down. So I'm going to round my 7 and 345 thousandths down to just 7. Alright, and the next one, compare. And we've seen a lot of problems like this on our tests. So we have to look at these two numbers and decide which one is bigger. Now, we've talked about this before. Even if a number has more places behind the decimal point, that does not mean it's bigger. Okay, we always have to look at the very first column and then we move forward. So if we look at our 4s, okay, 4s are the same, so right now we're equal. Then we move on to our next number and I check out the 5 or the 10th column. 5 and 4, and I can already see that 5 is bigger. So right now I'm going to put that 4 and 5 tenths is greater than 4 and 456 thousandths. Now, if this was a 5 and they were exactly the same at this point, I would have to go on to the next number and then see in my hundredth column which one is bigger. If they were still the same, then I would move on to the thousandths and then the 10,000ths. So you really keep on moving until one is bigger than the other. Always start with your tenths though, and then move on to your hundredths. Alright, the next one. Arrange these decimals from least, so the smallest, to greatest. Okay, so I'm going to check my ones, everything before the decimal, and see if one is bigger, one is smaller. These all happen to be all the same, all equal, all 0. So now I'm going to move on to my 10th column. So I'm arranging them from least to greatest, so I'm going to look for the smallest one first. Or I could find the largest one and narrow that out. So I have 4, 4, and 5. Well, we're arranging them from least to greatest, so I'm going to stick this 5/10 at the end, because I already know that that's the biggest. Alright, so I'm dealing with 4s now. So I look at my 4s and my tenths. 4, 4, we're the same. Okay, I need to go to my next column. I have 5s and a 5, and these are exactly the same. And if they're the same, then that means I need to go on to my third. And this really, even though it doesn't have anything there, my 45 hundredths, I really have a 0. And here I have a 7. So which one, a 0 or a 7, is the smallest? And obviously we would say 0. So then this becomes my smallest, and my next one, 1/1000ths, and then that is my order. Alright, the next one and the last one, write our decimal 457 thousandths as a fraction. Well, in the name, when you say that name out loud, it tells you what to put the number over. So when I'm making my fraction, this is going to be on top, and I'm trying to find out what my bottom number is. And normally we have tenths, and so we put it over a tenth. And if we have hundredths, we put it over 100. And now that our decimal is 1,000ths, we're going to put it over 1,000. So when you read it out loud, it will already tell you what the number needs to be under your fraction. Alright, and your lesson practice is this: 3 problems. Use words to name each number. Okay, make sure that you can see them. And then we will check these